Chapter 1. Can one kind gesture change your fate? Helen believed it could, until the day she learned just how cruel the world could be. Helen picked up the steaming casserole dish with practiced hands, her fingers barely feeling the heat through the faded towel. She'd made lasagna for Mrs. Crowley, the ancient widow next door, for the third time this month. Helen always had extra, and Mrs. Crowley always insisted on just one more bite. "Your kindness will come back to you, Helen," Mrs. Crowley rasped, a smile fighting its way through wrinkles. Helen shrugged, a little embarrassed. "That's what Mom used to say. Karma's like a boomerang. Let's hope it doesn't hit me in the face." As Helen made her way home, balancing an empty Pyrex and her overstuffed handbag, she replayed her mother's voice in her mind. Strong. Encouraging. The kind of woman who made you believe you could run the world, even if you ran out of breath halfway up the stairs. Inside, Helen checked her reflection. Not bad, she decided. The black skirt was forgiving, the green blouse made her eyes look less tired. She'd gone easy on the makeup, nothing screams desperate like lipstick teeth, and her hair was twisted into something almost professional. Today was interview day. The job was at a mid-size marketing firm, copywriter, full-time, with health benefits and an actual salary. Helen had spent the night before rehearsing her answers in the bathroom mirror, each, "Tell me about yourself," answered with the same forced confidence that got her through high school gym class. At reception, Helen's smile was met by a secretary who didn't bother to look up. The waiting area was a gallery of the polished and thin, young women with shined hair, men who wore expensive watches like they were birthmarks. Helen perched on the edge of her chair, knees pressed together, clutching her resume as if it might flee. Her turn finally came. The manager, Mr. Harrington, a salt-and-pepper jawline in a tailored suit, didn't offer his hand. Instead, his gaze slid from her shoes, up her calves, lingered at her waist, and flicked to her face. "So, Helen. Tell us why you want to join our team." Helen smiled, her voice steady. "I believe words matter. I want to help companies find their story and tell it honestly." Harrington's mouth twitched. He leaned over the desk and, lowering his voice, said, "Be honest with yourself, Helen. Do you really think you'd fit in here? We want people who look the part. The clients have expectations. Well, you're a little too." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Helen sat frozen. Was this real? In 2024? Was her entire life a punchline in some tired office joke? "Thank you for your time," she said quietly, folding her resume so her trembling hands wouldn't show. On the bus home, Helen stared at her reflection in the window. For the first time, she didn't see her mother's hope. She saw every childhood lunch, every gym locker snicker, every time she was told to just try harder. Helen cried the whole way home. But she didn't let the tears win. Not that night. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how Helen's world is about to flip upside down. Chapter 2. Humiliation can break you, or forge you into something new. What Helen did after that day shocked even herself. Helen didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, empty plate in front of her, and let every bitter word from that interview run laps in her mind. Too fat to interview. Too much to be considered. Too visible to be ignored, too invisible to be respected. She found herself typing into a search bar, "What to do after rejection." But no blog post or motivational quote could stitch up the wound left by Mr. Harrington's voice. At 3 a.m., she made a decision. If the world wouldn't offer her a seat at the table, she'd build her own damn table. Helen threw herself into freelance work, copywriting gigs, social media consulting, blog editing for anyone willing to pay. The early months were brutal. Clients ghosted her, payments were late, and most days she earned less than a barista. But there were moments of triumph. The first client who thanked her by name. The first viral campaign that started with her idea and ended with 1,000 shares. Each small victory was a thread, weaving her shattered confidence into something new. But Helen's family saw only exhaustion. Her sister, Marcia, called it delusional. Her father offered to help by emailing her job postings, entry level, no experience necessary, you'd be perfect. Helen smiled through the sarcasm, but her resentment built, brick by heavy brick. There was no roadmap. Just grit, stubbornness, and an ever-growing file of testimonials. And then, 3 years later, the call came. A mid-sized company, bigger than any she'd worked for, wanted a full campaign. Not as a freelancer. As a partner. She nearly dropped the phone. Helen hired her first employee, a stay-at-home mom, laid off after her last company restructured. Then a college graduate who was told her look wasn't marketable. Helen saw herself in every misfit she hired. But even as her business grew, Helen felt that old sting whenever she looked in the mirror. Success didn't erase those words. Some wounds scar, no matter how much you win. And then, one rainy afternoon, her assistant buzzed her. Harrington and Miles. They want a pitch meeting. With you. Everything Helen had built, every battle she'd fought, was about to collide with the past she thought she'd left behind. Stay tuned. The moment you've been waiting for is just around the corner. Chapter 3. What happens when you face the people who once broke you? Sometimes, revenge is a dish best served in the boardroom. Helen paced her office, the air thick with anticipation. She rehearsed her pitch so many times her voice felt like sandpaper. The day arrived, gray, damp, the kind of weather that made you wish you'd stayed in bed. She wore a deep navy suit, her mother's locket at her throat, and shoes that pinched just enough to keep her alert. When Harrington walked in, he didn't recognize her at first. Or pretended not to. He was older, but his eyes still held that glint of casual cruelty. Helen smiled, ice cold. Welcome. I'm Helen Murray, founder and CEO. Please, have a seat. The meeting was theater. Harrington tried to dominate the room, dropping industry jargon like confetti. But Helen's team, her people, matched him, insight for insight, story for story. She didn't flinch when Harrington's partner whispered, not quietly enough, she's the boss. Helen just smiled wider. When it came time to present, Helen pulled out all the stops, data, creativity, stories that made the room lean in. She let her team shine, especially the woman Harrington had dismissed at the coffee station earlier. The final slide. We hire talent, not waistlines. Because brilliance doesn't come in a single size. Silence. Then, awkward applause. Harrington stood, red creeping up his collar. Impressive. I think we can work together. Helen's heart hammered. She almost laughed. She thanked him, shook his hand. But as he left, she caught his gaze. This time, it was him looking for approval. In the elevator, Helen's team buzzed around her, all energy and hope. She excused herself, ducked into her office, and closed the door. She finally let herself cry, this time, from a relief so deep it hurt. But this wasn't the end. What happened next pushed Helen to her limit. You won't believe what she did when everything was on the line. Chapter 4. You think you know what victory looks like? Think again. Helen's greatest test was still to come. Just as Helen's company landed the contract, whispers started swirling, anonymous emails, vague threats. Someone was spreading rumors that Helen only got business by playing the victim card, that her company was diversity for optics. The old pain surfaced. Even her own staff seemed shaken. Helen's gut twisted as she read a comment under an industry news article. Maybe if she lost some weight, people would take her seriously. It felt like high school all over again. Her father called, worried. Don't let them get to you, Helen. You're stronger than that. Her sister, Marcia, suggested, just go on a diet. Prove them wrong. Helen's voice shook. This isn't about weight. It's about power. Helen called a staff meeting. Her team sat tense, wary. She didn't give them a pep talk. She told them the truth. How many of you have been told you're not enough? Hands rose, one after another. Helen looked at each of them, steady and raw. We are here because we are different. Because we know how it feels to be left out, and we will never do that to anyone else. The company rallied. They started a campaign, not enough? Good. That's where we start. Clients responded. People reached out, sharing their own stories of being dismissed and diminished. But the attacks didn't stop. Harrington called, nervous. This is bad press. We need to distance ourselves. Helen listened, then replied, voice even. You hired me for my mind, not my waistline. If that's changed, say it to my face. Silence. Helen realized, the final battle wasn't with the world, it was with herself. One choice, one confrontation, would decide everything. You won't want to miss how Helen claims her power, once and for all. Chapter 5. Does forgiveness set you free, or does it give your enemies another chance? Helen had to choose, her past, or her future. Helen watched the city lights flicker outside her office, rain tracing blurry lines down the glass. Her company had survived the onslaught, but the scars, old and new, throbbed with every step. Harrington requested a private meeting. Just to clear the air. Helen agreed. This time, she chose the restaurant, a place she felt comfortable, where she knew the staff would treat her like royalty. Harrington looked tired, deflated. I was wrong, he said, no preamble. You deserved better. I was small-minded. Helen almost smiled. It was the apology she'd dreamed of, but it felt hollow. People change, she said. But the world doesn't, unless we make it. He nodded, embarrassed. Why did you hire me, then? After everything, he asked. Helen's answer was simple, because I don't want to be you. I want to be better. They shook hands, a real handshake this time. Helen felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but release. Afterward, she returned to her office. Her team surprised her with cake, cheap, messy, but the best she'd ever tasted. You built this, her assistant said, grinning. No one can take it away. Helen realized she was finally free, not because the world had changed, but because she had. And as she watched her team laugh, tell stories, and make plans for the future, she knew she would never let anyone's words define her again. The past had shaped her, but Helen was the one who wrote her own ending. Chapter 6. What happens when your success threatens others? Helen thought she'd climbed the mountain, until someone tried to pull her back down. Helen was used to looks. Open, envious, or those that tried not to notice. But now her own gaze mixed with fear, not for herself, but for what she had built. One anonymous email turned her life into hell. You think you're better than the rest? Don't forget who you used to be. She laughed, alone, in front of the mirror. Better to be fat Helen than a small-minded rat, she muttered, wiping off her makeup with a cotton pad. But the laughter faded quickly. Rumors spread through the industry. Helen was allegedly poaching employees, paying special clients for good reviews, seducing investors by playing the discrimination card. Who started this? Her assistant Laura asked, voicing what everyone thought. Someone who's scared to lose their monopoly on humiliation, Helen shot back sarcastically. Her voice trembled, though she looked icy on the outside. She started coming home later than usual. Her father would wait up for her with dinner and the kind of wisdom only old men possess. They'll fear you more when they realize they can't break you, he said. And what if they do? Then you weren't building this for yourself. That night, Helen replayed every humiliation, and the joy she took in getting revenge through success. She remembered those who suffered because of her, her employees who'd received threats and weird calls. I won't let myself be caged again, she told herself, writing a new speech for the morning staff meeting. But morning started without her. It started with the news. One of the clients had broken the contract for personal reasons. The company was teetering on the edge. Should she protect her business or finally protect herself? Ahead, a decisive choice, one that would change everything. Chapter 7. How far would you go to protect your truth? When the world demanded Helen apologize for who she was, she had to decide, comply or fight back. Helen had spent her whole life trying to be convenient. Modest even when she won, quiet even when she was screaming inside. But now she was called a threat, just for refusing to hide and refusing to be ashamed. Why aren't you responding to the accusations? A journalist asked at a public event, thrusting a microphone in her face. Because I'm not about to apologize for existing, Helen shot back. The crowd buzzed. Some clapped, some hissed. That evening her sister Marcia called. Why are you provoking them? Just act simple, you've always done that. Acting simple is not a strategy. I'm done with that. In the company, tension rose. Some employees were scared of too much publicity, others wanted to lay low, some suggested suing for slander. Helen gathered everyone in the conference room. If you're with me, we don't back down. I won't let fear become our policy. There are no more outsiders here. Here, it's us. Laura was the first to raise her hand. Then everyone else followed. They released a public statement, bold, merciless, honest. We won't change the world by staying silent. We're tired of your standards, your rules, your labels. Learn to recognize talent, not judge by the seams of a suit. Half the clients supported them. The other half vanished. The business was on thin ice. But for the first time in years, Helen smiled without hiding her teeth. It was the riskiest step, and the most honest. What would happen next? Would Helen dare do what once seemed impossible? Chapter 8. What if standing up for yourself means standing alone? Helen was about to discover if her truth was strong enough to outlast the storm. The crisis dragged on for weeks. Finances were tight, employees asked for advances, suppliers threatened with penalties. Maybe it's time to stop fighting? Marcia pleaded. It's not a war, it's my life, Helen answered tiredly, flipping through reports. One evening, when it seemed like everything was about to collapse, Laura came to her with a shoebox. Letters, she explained. Real ones. People wrote that your story helped them not to give up. In the box were dozens of envelopes, from women and men, teens and seniors. I'm looking for a job again because you showed me I don't have to be perfect. My daughters saw your interview, and went to her first job interview. Helen sat on the floor, reading every letter. For the first time in years, she cried not from pain, but from pride and gratitude. A week later, an old client, one of the first she saved from getting fired when she started the business, came to see her. "People are afraid of you, Helen," he said, smiling. "That means you're doing everything right." He renewed his contract, and brought friends. Within a month, the company had new clients. Employees who left, returned. Even Marcia admitted, "You built something no one can destroy." Helen realized, sometimes you have to be alone to finally become yourself. But most importantly, she was no longer ashamed of who she was. Now she was hiring people who once wouldn't have been let through the door. Helen's journey isn't over, because the fight for dignity, self-worth, and truth never truly ends. Want to know what happens when the world tries to silence you again? Don't miss the next chapter, because every no can become your greatest yes.